Hello to our viewers. Welcome back. This is our second episode of Eastern Europe politics. This episode, we want to talk to you about Mr. Navalny. Navalny is an opposition leader in Russia, and we want to talk about who he is and what happened to him. Spoiler alert, he got poisoned. And we want to talk about the ramification of what happened, how it happened, who it serves well, who it does not. And as always, today I am your host, and Dr. Daniel Phelan is with us, and he has a lot of interesting insights on this incident. So, Daniel, I'll tell you what I know almost as a layman person of Navalny, and then tell me if you agree with that observation or you have anything to add to that. So as far as I know, Mr. Navalny is a leader of an opposition that the Kremlin, Putin, does not want to allow anywhere near the government, anywhere near actual power in Russia. And the Kremlin is very successful and very good at creating what's called system opposition. So basically, they would pay somebody money, and that person would talk as if they are the opposition. And then whenever the Kremlin wants anything, they will just say, okay, now about this topic, don't say anything. So is it an accurate observation? Would you agree with that?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that the Kremlin is so successful in creating what you call the legal opposition, or what term exactly you used, because actually they have, like in Russia, you have four parties officially, like four parties that sit in the State Duma. So you could call them the system parties. And you have a lot other smaller parties who don't sit in the Duma. So it's kind of like the Senate, like the Congress. I don't know, like in any country you've got like the Reichstag, or you've got the House of Commons. So in Russia you've got four parties, and you could say, well, you've got four parties, and that's certainly true. What you said about the fact that the other three parties, they vote on most significant points together with the leading party. But I'm not sure that these three parties, at least not to the extent that they are able to picture themselves as real opposition. So most people in Russia, they understand that these parties are part of the system. But for many, that's actually, it's not a bad thing. For many people in Russia, and that's the way people understand politics in Russia, certainly not all, but I would say a small majority, like maybe 55, 60%, for them, you should be with the government. Even you can like criticize the government on certain points, but certainly on foreign policy or on such like matters there your interests clash with other countries, you should be together with the president. That's the first thing. Concerning what you said about Navalny, so you said that the Kremlin is very effective in preventing from running. So that certainly is true. But actually the Kremlin doesn't allow any legal, real opposition in the country. So you could say with a lot of difficulty that you've got a party which is called, it's like Yablaka, it's like kind of like an apple in English, even though it's not exactly like an apple, but it's an apple. we are not going to get into too much detail. So these people, you could say that they are kind of a real opposition, but they are extremely moderate. They will always tell you never, for example, go protest if the government decided that it's not legal to protest. And the government will tell you, well, you should sit at home, don't protest because it's illegal. And Yabloko, they will tell you, well, that's not good what they did. That's like completely wrong, but you've got this law, and we don't have the moral. We have the moral obligation actually to keep our supporters from getting arrested. So they are not ready to stand their ground, you can say. So it's a question like, can you call them real opposition or not? It's another thing. But Navalny, if you'll speak about Navalny, he's the only and real opposition leader in Russia right now. That's what is really important for our discussion.
I see. So, it's very interesting. You raised some very interesting points to me. I really wanted to interrupt you, but I didn't.
Thank you.
So you said that um, most of the people in Russia believe that the opposition should align on some matters with the current government. I think I don't have a way to prove it, okay, but I honestly think it's a product of the propaganda that has been uh, streamed into people's brains for years, and even today is being streamed, right? So you have this system opposition that always acts in such a manner. I think that if Russia was an actual pluralistic society, you would not see a case where opposition on some matters has to align. That's why they're in opposition, because they disagree with the government. But some edge cases, I would even see. I believe that even pluralistic society in a democracy, you would still have an opposition in some cases agree with the current government, but just not as much with Russia. Not as much as it happens with system opposition in Russia. And another thing that you mentioned, and if you mentioned Yabloko, we should probably say that their previous, I don't know what's the right term, the person that led this party, Nemtsov, Mr. Nemtsov. Am I correct? He was the leader of Yabloko?
No. It's Yavlinsky, and he's the leader of Yabloko since the day they created the party. For some time, he wasn't like the nominal. He wasn't the. He wasn't the jure leader, but actually he stayed de facto leader even at the time that he wasn't. And Nemtsov, he was the leader of another party, which does not cease to exist in 2004. And
so about Mr. Nemtsov, what's really interesting is that he was assassinated, right? And before he was assassinated, and we're kind of digressing from our issue, but we'll bring the conversation back to Navalny and what happened to him. But Nemtsov was assassinated right before he had a plan to organize the opposition into one party, so that that party could actually be in the Duma. Is that something that you agree with that statement? I heard it from different people online, and I read some articles about that. Did you hear his plan about that before he got assassinated?
Well, I heard about it, but I must tell you that I am very skeptical about his prospects, because, as a matter of fact, about like 10 years ago or a bit more, I don't want to mess things up. Nemtsov was able, they created Nemtsov and a few other party leaders from different parties who were liberal parties in the 90s. They were able to unite, but actually after a couple of years, they split up, and actually that's one of the biggest problems in Russia of the oppositional side, that all those liberal politicians, they keep on arguing with each other, and they spend more time on fighting each other instead of fighting, the Kremlin. And as a matter of fact, for me, Nemtsov's murder was so crazy, especially because at the time he was assassinated, no, Navalny surpassed him on all issues by that point. And for many people, Nemtsov was kind of it was like the past day. He wasn't the leader who was going to lead to the renewal of liberal politics in Russia. And that was like kind of crazy. You could say why they killed him. Maybe if they would kill him 10 years earlier, he could look like a threat. But now he didn't look like a threat even. So that's kind of crazy. And if you'll just allow me, I just want to make a quick remark about what you said about Russian opposition and the way people look at it. So I just want to add a bit of a historical perspective. So just think about European society, even the liberal countries like France and the United Kingdom, which were the two true democracies at that point of time. And then the First World War started. So suddenly all parties, they supported the government. So it's kind of, we can argue about everything, but we have a common foe, or we are like united together against this enemy who wants to kill us. And I don't want to get into details about it. What I wanted to stress is that for many people in Russia, and that's completely true what you said, that it's like a thing of propaganda, but this propaganda, this set mind, it never ceased, starting from the Tsarist Russia, and it became much worse in the Bolshevik times, and now during Putin's reign, it just continued the whole time. So you have whole generations who grew up understanding, like, for them, government is someone who is kind of supposed to take care of them, and an opposition. And it's also a philological question. Like in Stalin's time, for example, when they purged a lot of people, they used the term like left opposition and right opposition. And it wasn't, you must understand that in every language, you've got the same word. Like in Russia, it's opposition, like оппозиция, like in English, but it stems from the same noun, like to oppose someone to. But the way a lot of people understand that word, it's not this legal opposition. Like in Great Britain, you've got opposition of Her Majesty, or I don't remember the exact term, but that kind of Her Majesty. You've got the government of Her Majesty and you've got the opposition of Her Majesty. So everyone belongs to. The Queen stands in the middle, and you can be against the current government, but you are still kind of part of the country. But for people in Russia, then they hear opposition, still a lot of them. It sounds kind of, like some foreign force. I don't know, you are opposed to whom exactly? You are opposed to us, because people, they associate themselves with the government. So if you oppose the government, you oppose the country itself. And it's actually a very important thing to understand.
Okay, that definitely makes sense to me. It is a little bit problematic, this type of thinking. I personally believe that it's problematic. I don't think it's an appropriate way to think about a position, but I definitely agree with that. I don't have any contention points here.
Yeah, I just try to explain, because it's not about my judgment. I just want to make it clear how a lot of people look at opposition in Russia.
Yeah, I understand. So I want to go back to Mr. Navalny, and I want to ask you just two questions into one here. First, I want to understand how effective do you think he was I have my own opinion, of course. And why the Kremlin never says his name? Because he always, once in a while, they would say, they would make a statement about Mr. Navalny, but they will never say his name. I don't know if you heard anything like that before, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with your second question. Actually, like most opposition, in Russia, they laugh about that issue, and everyone, like even in Russia, read Harry Potter and Voldemort. The one you should never call him by his name, and they just they make fun of it the whole time that Navalny is like the Voldemort, the Kremlin. So that is certainly something like kind of odd or funny. So I think that it started. They didn't want to mention him at first because they didn't want to mention him. They didn't want to give him credit in the beginning, but then he got more and more popular. And at that point, if they would start mentioning him by his name, then it would kind of mean that they recognize him as a force. So then they didn't want to mention him at that point as well. And now everyone waits for them to mention him by his name, like, okay, Putin, you should recognize him as your real and one foe. So he doesn't do it because people are waiting for it. So he doesn't want to do it. And also, actually, a lot of people talk about it, that Putin, I wouldn't call him like a believing man. Like he's not in the maybe traditional sense, but he's certainly spiritual. And I think that I really think that he believes in a certain way that if he will call him by his name, it's I don't know, like like Yeri has the walls. You need to circumvent the walls 9 times and they will fall. Kind of things that for me looks like abracadabra. I don't think that they are so meaningless for Putin, who really thinks that he was chosen by the God Almighty to rule Mother Russia. So he shouldn't, and if he will name Navalny, bombs, it will hit him. That's the first thing. And your second question was, how effective is he? Well, no, that's a really tough question, actually. It might sound like simple, but it's a really tough question, because you could say, well, he posts videos on YouTube, he makes investigations, and you could criticize most of his investigations because usually he provides quite a lot of documentation, but it's not something with which you could go to court. In court, it wouldn't work, but it sounds convincing for most viewers. But at the end, you say, okay, so he was able to found that top ranking politician, he got a lot of money. But most people in Russia, first of all, they know that. And second thing, well, Putin doesn't give a damn about it. So it's kind of, he made people aware of that corruption. But yeah, most people know that he got $1 billion or $10 billion. So Navalny makes those really good videos where you could see those huge castles. And certainly one thing to know that someone is very rich, another thing to see a huge castle, especially if it's located not even in Russia. Sometimes in the States, actually, or in France, or in Switzerland. So it's an important thing to me, and I think for people who are opposed to Putin, or who were in the first place kind of critically minded, he played a significant role. But for Putin's electorate, and it's usually middle-aged people, like more women than men. They don't watch YouTube, and they don't know. Like they heard the name Navalny, but for them, he's just a crook. So, and at the same time, you could say, okay, so you actually want to tell me that he's not so important, but why would they poison them if he wasn't important? Why would they fight him the whole time if he wasn't important? So I would say I would say if he was not important, Kremlin wouldn't do such a big story about Navalny. So Navalny is important. He is important for the Kremlin, at least, because they see in him the only person at the moment who is able to oppose them. And you know, in Russia, you don't have politicians except two people. You've got Putin and you've got Navalny, because Putin's men, they're not politicians, they're Putin's men, they're not independent players. And you don't have any, and they don't have any other
The internet dropped.
yes, and they don't have any other opposition leaders who are able to gather people around them. So in that sense, Navalny is very important. And maybe if you will just, you know, mention Belarus for a tiny moment, why people like Navalny could be important. So in Belarus right now, they don't have any oppositional leaders. And the fact that they don't have their own Navalny, who could, at that point of time, push the government, so the opposition in Belarus are unable to get what they want. And maybe the Kremlin understands that in a tough situation, Navalny will be the man who could bring them to ruin.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I agree with what you mentioned about Kremlin not mentioning his name for sure. What I want to add is I've asked how effective he is, and you mentioned that it's a hard question, and I agree it's not easy to answer because it really depends how you measure effectiveness, right? If you measure effectiveness of a position, are they able to, you know, is he able to become a president, right? If you measure it that way, then he's not successful. He's not effective, right? Because he does not have any political power at the moment. But I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from a perspective where most of the Russian people, right, it's about 140 something million, they consume news and consume knowledge from the TV, most of them, right? But the Western society has morphed already in the last, I don't know, 10 years, and most people consume their news and their information about world events, not necessarily from the TV, but also from YouTube, from the internet, and so on and so forth, right? And so in Russia, what I see is this process that people are slowly, especially youngsters, turn to their phones, turn to their laptops, turn to the internet, right? And they consume content from there. And, you know, the Kremlin is, of course, a bureaucracy. It's not as effective with innovation as one might want them to be, right? Which is expected. And then Navalny he entered into that vacuum, right? With his YouTube channel, with his investigations. And some of his investigations were very popular to the point that everyone that, you know, I know in Russia talked about it, and I'm sure everybody that you know in Russia talked about it as well. I believe the title was "He is Not a Demon," something like that. And what I see is the Kremlin actually, and you alluded to that, right? The Kremlin feels that Mr. Navalny is a certain threat, right? When you said that they believe he's important. I believe that it's from that space, right? They believe that he's a threat under a certain situation, and so Navalny had to be discarded, right? And this is where we actually get to our main topic that we wanted to discuss today, Mr. Navalny. We wanted to kind of give you a baseline and understanding who that person is, and a little bit of their relationship between Navalny and the Kremlin, i.e. Putin. And now we want to discuss the main thing, right? So Mr. Navalny, about, I believe, I don't remember the exact date, but I believe it happened about a week or so ago. He was actually poisoned, right? Where at least we suspect, everybody suspect he was poisoned. So he was in, so there are supposed to be local Duma elections in each region, and he flew to a certain province to plan and discuss with his people, his party, how to arrange their strategy and so on and so forth. And then when he was flying back at the airport, he ordered tea, okay? And when they boarded the plane, he felt really bad to the point that he collapsed, he started screaming. There's actually recordings online where he screams. And the pilots very quickly realized something wrong, and they landed and evacuated Mr. Navalny into a hospital. And there is more about this incident to tell, right? But what I want to ask you, Daniel, I'm actually very intrigued what you're going to say about this. Who do you believe pulled the trigger on Mr. Navalny? By the way, Mr. Navalny is in a coma. He's alive right now, and he is treated in a clinic called Charité in Germany.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So, you know, it's a very problematic thing, like to answer who exactly is in charge, you know, of Navalny's poisoning. And you know, the experts in Charité clinic in Berlin, they made some tests, and they said that they found poison in his body, and not some poison, but poison that is alike, not the same, but alike. The poison, for example, with which the Skripals in Great Britain were poisoned. Well, I could say that it's on the wall. That's on the wall. That's but can we be 100% certain with that? Probably not 100%, but we can be pretty much sure that if it wasn't Putin, then Putin should be very interested in a all-out investigation. And at the current moment, doesn't look like the Russians and like the Russian government is going to lift a finger. And so I think that it's also important to mention, like you said, Navalny was on a trip, and you mentioned the elections. So Navalny arranged something which is called smart elections, and he decided if we can't have our guy, for example, in the elections, we are going to vote for any candidate who will be the less pro-government candidate. And he arranges people through the internet, and in every circle of, in every place that you have elections, you've got some local deputies or on any level, he just tells people whom they should vote for. and he says maybe it's not going to be like the best guy, but it's not going to be someone from Putin's team. So he wants to ruin him by preventing from most of his supporters getting into different organs of power, and he actually proved to be quite successful on certain levels. And some people think that it's also a big threat because you have Duma elections in Russia next year. So some people say that it was one of the reasons to poison him. But in any case, the poisoning itself, why you and me, why and I, we think that Putin had to be in charge, has to do with one thing. And it is that Putin recognizes and he acknowledges, he never will say it out loud, but it's clear for all, that Navalny is the only true opposition leader in Russia. And Putin is like the Tsar. And if you are the Tsar of all the land, you're supposed to make the big decisions, right? So he won't allow someone, not even his top deputies, just to decide, well, we are going to kill that man, because that man is way too important. And if someone has so much power, he can kill the opposition leader today. Tomorrow he might think that he is really independent of me, right? But in any case, so Putin's, as far as we know, and all experts, they tend to agree on that point. Any important decision that has to do with Navalny, he decides at the end. So he will decide if it will be possible to imprison him, or if it will be possible, to allow him to fly abroad for this medical treatment. And that's exactly the difficult point to understand. So you say, if they wanted to poison him, if the Russians wanted to poison Navalny, and Navalny is in Russia, is a Russian citizen, and the whole state is against him, like the whole state machine is against him, why they were unable to kill him? So they could kill him in 1,000 different ways. And at the end, the plane lands in Omsk, they bring him to the hospital, they save his life. It's a fact, they save his life. They keep him alive. Then they keep him there for 2 days, after which they pronounce that they didn't find any poison in his body. And only then they release him to this clinic in Berlin. And you say, doesn't make any sense, right? If they want to poison him, or if they want to kill him, so they could kill him 20 times. They could, shoot him like they did with Nemtsov. Actually, I don't think that Putin was in charge of killing Nemtsov. You've got some other tough dude who sits in North Caucasus in Chechnya, but it's another story. But you say, okay, he was there, they could kill him, and after they didn't kill him, they could kill him in the hospital, or at least they could keep him in Russia, because they were supposed to understand that now in Germany, even if they wouldn't be able to save his life, so they will find that he was poisoned. And what's the idea behind it? You've got this scandal, especially if it was an accident, like a real accident, people probably wouldn't trust the Russian government, but they would say, he had a ski accident or something like that. Things like that happen. But poisoning like someone who just dies at the age of 42, 43 years old doesn't happen. So that makes this whole story so strange.
Okay. I definitely agree that it's a strange story. I feel I am more convinced than you are that Putin was the one to pull the trigger. I know you kind of suspect that it's Putin, but you can't say 100%. I feel like he built this system, right? So there is no running around from responsibility. He stands at the top of the hierarchy. He is to blame for things like that.
No, that's for
And
sure. That's
I
for sure.
actually feel, yeah. So I actually feel that there's a lot of signs that he did that, right? So one of the signs is the propaganda strategies that they take, right? So it's not a good thing for the Kremlin. They keep on always say, well, it's not a good thing for us that Navalny will be murdered or anything like that. Uh, they always say, they started saying Navalny had too much to drink. So I don't know how much you need to drink to be in a coma for a week, and it doesn't seem like he's coming out of the coma anytime soon.
He's a Russian.
Navalny took
So
some,
he's a real Russian. So he's
yeah, okay, real Russian. Navalny took some mix of medication that he shouldn't have, right? And you can hear. I actually listened to some doctors, right? That doctors that specialize in poisoning, and they're saying, listen, this it will not cause a coma like this. So it doesn't make sense. But still, there, people that associate with the government, with the Kremlin, they are surfacing those theories, right, to confuse the people. And some people say that it's just Navalny's fault somehow, right? That his sugar level dropped or whatever. Anyway, some things that you hear uh, the journalists that associate with themselves with the Kremlin, always in support of the Kremlin, they suddenly come up with different excuses, right? So that's another sign to me that that Putin pulled the trigger. And really, well, one thing you alluded to that, you didn't say anything about that, but really, I think what pushed him over the edge is what's going on. He sees that, first of all, we talked in a different episode, in our first episode, how Belarusian people and Russian people are very, very close culturally and in other aspects. And he sees how the Belarusian people rose up against their dictator, right? So he, imagines in a certain point in time, maybe the Russian people will rise against him, right? So he wants to make sure that if that happens, the opposition is very, very weak. So again, all the arrows point at Putin, right? So to that extent, I believe he is to blame. But you're 100% right. We can't know 100%. We can't say with 100% certainty that he did that. That I would give him that level of benefit of the doubt.
yeah. I would just
Is
like
there
to
anything else you wanted to
yeah,
mention?
I would just
Go ahead.
like to add that why I'm not 100% sure. We can't forget the fact that you have a lot of people uh, whom Navalny, with his investigations about corruption, so he hurt them badly, like not to the point that they, lost their fortune or something, but their prestige, it was hurt. Or in the West before, they were like friends of some big people in the West, and afterwards probably some people turned away from them, and you could say he had a lot of enemies. And to a certain degree, you could say it's possible that, and they are all very influential and powerful people. So maybe someone thought that he will just, smash this guy. And also, what I meant then, like, who's to blame? So the question is also, did they want to kill Navalny, or did they want, just to poison him, to make him, to scare him off? What was the idea behind it? So it's not exactly clear to me. And I'm not sure that we are going to find out, not before the regime in Russia will, change, and we'll have the ability to go into archives and to understand what they really wanted. Uh, but in other respects, so I agree with you, and I'm pretty much sure that the government, so like the government and in Russia, the state machine is very united. So it's Putin who stands at the top, and it doesn't matter if Naval. I mean, it doesn't matter if Putin said like I want to get rid of that guy, and then they decided to poison him. So it's not about the details. Certainly, Putin didn't sit there, with a notebook and he planned the operation. But probably Putin said, and that's the main issue. Did he say, "Let's get rid of him"? Like, like in Stalin's way, like people disappear, or let's say, or maybe he said something else, and people around him, they didn't understand him correctly. And you have some historical situations actually, like in England, then they killed the Archbishop. I suddenly just flew out of my mind the name of the king. It was so he said, this guy, he's just pisses me off, and then some people understood it like we need to kill him. And probably he didn't, maybe he meant it like at that moment, but he didn't really meant like to kill him. He just was upset at that current moment. So it's another question, but in any case, it's still his responsibility that he created such a mechanism, even if he didn't intend to kill him. But like you've got people who can interpret his words in a certain manner, in such a way that they eliminate someone, they kill a person, they poison him, and it's kind of crazy. Like they poison an opposition leader. It's 2020. It's crazy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you that it's crazy. And one thing I would like to add here is, to me, I definitely want to hear if you agree with that point or not. But to me, it's terrorism, right? Because when you poison the head of the opposition in your country, then every other person, right, in your country will think, oh, okay, if they did that with the head of the opposition, right, a political figure, then of course they will do whatever they want with me if I step on somebody's toes, or if I disagree with something, or if I go complaining. So basically, this is how I see it, right? He terrorizes the whole people in Russia, right, through this act of poisoning the opposition leader. Yeah, it makes his regime a little bit stable, but in my view, it's terrorism. So I'm wondering, do you see this as terrorism?
Well, I think it's a more, question of conceptual question, how we understand the meaning of a certain word. In Russia, in Stalin's time, you had a period which was called like the Big Terror, like not a terrorism, terror, because like it was the terror of the state against its own citizens. So in a certain way, like terrorism, mostly it refers to a small group which fights with which fights the society, and this group is not strong enough actually to do something, but they terrorize people. They make them scared. Yeah, because who are terrorists? They can't conquer a country, and they can destroy the army, but they can kill certain people who can be completely innocent. But exactly the fact they are completely innocent, it makes everyone kind of a victim, like at least a possible victim. Like you don't know, maybe tomorrow you'll get on a bus and the bus will explode. So you start fearing, but they don't have that force. And in that case, you've got like the whole state apparatus. They can actually imprison and kill, they can use force. And it's a bit different from that perspective, but at the end, it's kind of the same. They terrorize their own citizens, not all of them, because they just want to terrorize the people who are opposed to the government. But it's kind of the same methods. They want to show anyone that even if this person whom most of the people in the West, they know, they at least heard his name. People who are interested in politics heard his name, and people who are heads of states, they know who he is. They can kill him or they can get rid of him. So it makes people think, well, if they can kill, they can hurt Navalny, who I should, keep my mouth shut, or I should just leave the country and wander somewhere else. So in that sense, it's terror, and it's terrorism.
Very interesting topic. Very intriguing. Very intriguing. Very interesting talking to you about that. I appreciate your time. So we covered who Mr. Navalny is, a little bit of Russian opposition, history of poisoning or assassination inside Russia, right? And I suggest that everybody remembers that, yeah, I don't want to imply anything, but every coin has two sides to it, right? So what happens in Russia today only matters to Russians, but tomorrow it might matter to people outside of Russia. So I think it's very important. Those are my views on that. So this was our second podcast chapter, and coming up, we have some really awesome episodes for you about what's going on in Belarus, and very interesting one that we're planning to do is inside Putin's head. So stay tuned. Like our videos if you enjoyed the content, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. Dr. Philin, do you have any final words?
I just would like to end, like, let's wish good health to Navalny. Hope that he will, he will get out of his story alive and well.
100%.
Thank you.
I would like to join you in that. I hope maybe one day he will listen to this, to our podcast, and he will be alive and well. Thank you very much. This was Paul and Daniel.